Thank you all so much for joining us. I am Jamie. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of Mento, and I am joined by a few phenomenal panelists here who I will introduce in just a moment. Before I do that, I did want to set the foundation of why we are all here and why this conversation on people managers and how we're thinking about supporting people managers in 2024 is such an urgent and important conversation. So what we will be discussing today is what's going on with managers, how we're thinking about supporting them, and everyone here will leave with some new insights and tactics and strategies from innovative organizations and people leaders like the ones I have the pleasure of sitting with on the panel. And but just to set the foundation, I think we all experience this, so none of these stats will come as a surprise to you all, but people managers are not all right. We have a ton on our plate. Managers are almost always in dual IC manager roles these days. We just read the stat, which continues to astound me, but it's not that we're just in these roles, it's that we're spending so much time doing both of these roles. Like, there's only so many hours in the day, but there was a stat that 45% of managers are spending more time managing projects than managing people. That's actually not entirely surprising, but it feels like a big stat when you hear it out loud. And the reason, and what we're seeing is there's huge downstream effects of that. Managers are stressed out. Over 50% of managers are reporting a lot of stress, fatigue, etc. I think that number is probably even a little bit higher than that. They're not receiving the support they need. Last year, we saw a huge reduction in the amount that companies were investing in their managers, with only about $500 being spent per manager. That's less than a cup of coffee a day. And when you think about it in terms of other company spend, that's tiny. And only 1 in 2 managers are confident in their manager's ability to lead their team. That's also really surprising to me. But I think it really stems from the fact that people managers aren't being given the support and the skill development they need. And also on top of that, having their own IC roles. We've been hearing a lot throughout this past year of doing more with less, but that's a really hard thing to do. And what does that even mean? So we all know that managers make or break the experience. They are the growth engines of companies. We know that companies that have effective leadership have higher profits and are more effective as companies and organizations. And we also know that people leave because of their managers at the end of the day. So that is why we're all here. We know that companies are wisening up to this, and we also know that people leaders are doing a lot to fight for the investment of their people managers and have been huge advocates for that. Mento just conducted our own survey, and 75% of HR leaders said they were planning on increasing their investments in their managers in 2024. A huge percentage of that was also on first-time and new managers. So that's why we're all here. What does this sort of investment in managers look like? Is it back? And what does it look like today and for the unique challenges that today's managers face, which have also evolved tremendously over the past few years? So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce you all to my phenomenal panelists here. I am joined by KJ Jennison, who heads up leadership development at Shippo, Ty Pemble, who leads people initiatives at Extend, and of course, Shanna Yearwood, who is a human capital and talent strategist at Booz Allen Hamilton. Thank you all for being here. We're all very lucky to be able to learn from you all today and what innovative organizations like yours are up to. So let's first just dive in. And I think one thing that we can all talk about to start is just like what's going on with people managers. What are the challenges that they're facing? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? And how has that evolved over the past few years? As people leaders, what's taking up your time and energy? And what are you seeing that's going on? So I'll open it up. Whoever wants to dive in, please do. I see KJ, I think you've got some thoughts there. I saw some smiles and
Okay.
and laughs. So maybe you can kick it off for us.
Yeah, you asked this, and it's such a wonderful question. And I think a lot of it leads into what you were sharing about kind of the state of managers today. And there's a lot on their plates. We definitely see it at Shippo, and that's not to say it's any different than any other organization sees it, in that managers are being asked to do a lot. I think a couple of things that have come to mind for me on that, as workplaces have shifted over the past 4+ years to where it's not just on-site versus remote. You have hybrid, you've got companies still kind of going back and forth on what their philosophy is. And I think when there hasn't been much of a settling on that ground for some companies, it creates an unstable environment for managers to try to lead from, while they're also trying to do those dual roles. And we see that a lot, within our organization, of we're asking our managers to do a lot of things. They're creating a lot of things fast, but they're also leading teams of varying sizes. And when they're doing that remotely, as they are at Shippo, it can be hard to make sure you're staying on top of the things that are being asked of you, and also making sure that you're leading these people effectively. Because the secret trick we all know is that each person on your team is a unique individual who has hopes, wants, dreams, and aspirations that really
Absolutely.
effective managers have to look to understand. And that time that it takes, it becomes just so hard to get that back.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, KJ. And I think there's some sort of age-old problems that we see. And I think one of those is definitely having to drive business results and then also manage people, as we've been talking about. I think for us as a consulting organization, we have, real metrics around billability and targets that you're held to. And those business targets are, we don't have the same level of accountability for you managing your people. So the motivation is a little bit higher to focus on the business. I think there's the age-old problem of promoting folks who are good in their role and maybe not the best people leaders, right? So then they get into the role and they're not really sure how they're supposed to be managing people. And then I think there's the newer problem, which KJ, you're alluding to, around remote work, hybrid work. How do you manage folks? I think there's a real change and shift in expectations of what a manager is supposed to be doing and how well they're supposed to, get to know their people. And so for us, a lot of it is going back to the basics of how do you show empathy? How do you build trust with your employees so that you can have these more difficult conversations and address, things like performance concerns and DEI conversations, the kinds of things that employees are really looking for today as we see some of the generational shifts.
Yeah, super interesting. And I'd love to explore some of those generational shifts. What are you all seeing in your workforces? We obviously hear a lot about managing Gen Z. Are you seeing are the stereotypes and the rumors true, if you will? What are you seeing on the ground? And is that impacting how you're thinking about talent development today for and especially manager upskilling?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen here at Extend and even prior companies for me is just new managers that start managing in a remote environment. So it always used to be that, maybe you had somebody that you could model in the office or emulate or potentially shadow. And a lot of that's gone now. And so the main struggle that we see here is how we make sure we get young managers really confident in their roles. And making sure that we're setting them up for success. So we've been able to implement a number of programs here at Extend, which have been super helpful for our managers and also I think land really well, but it doesn't just stop there. Like a lot of folks are distracted. We're in a remote world where maybe they're not paying attention. And so we have to be really intentional, especially when we have new promotions or young managers, to make sure they have what they need to be successful and create a space for them to be able to either ask questions or look for resources that our people team can provide for them.
Just I'll add into that. We see a lot of the similar things, and one of the things that at least from our organization, what I found is interesting from the generational kind of management spectrum is the resources that you kind of mentioned, in that gone are the days, and some people still have them, of being able to just physically shadow someone for maybe a week, follow them around a job site or a work location. And I would have assumed that going into maybe a fully remote environment, as Shippo is, that was going to be a hardship for us. But the connection I found is if you're giving people the information and the resources, that actually tends to be what I found in an organization, the centralized hub. If I can get you the right resources, if I can get you the right information, the generational aspect maybe lessens a little bit because you're getting what you need.
And I think as a former stereotype researcher, Jamie, I won't say that they feed into the stereotype, but I think there are some things about Gen Z that seem to be unique and different. I think for us, it's really about communication and what kinds of communication they're looking for, what kinds of channels they're using. But I think on the positive side, they are very resourceful, right? So they know
Yeah.
how to research, they know how to find things, they know
Yeah.
how to leverage the existing technology and platforms that we've created, and are more likely to delve into those than some of their more tenured counterparts or folks who are further along in their career. So it's really about helping to meet them where they are, and understanding that some of the maybe communications might be different, but just as willing to work hard as everybody else.
Okay. Sorry, Gen Z, you've been redeemed on this panel. I love that. That's fantastic. So it sounds like that, we're hearing a lot of the same challenges that managers face. We've seen them pretty consistently, and there's clearly and most definitely something about a new normal that was probably happening, or most certainly happening even before the pandemic started, of how to train and develop managers and what people expect from their managers. I'd be curious to unpack a little bit. This stat I think is really interesting to me. The one about, that only 1 in 2 employees is confident in their manager's ability to lead their team to be successful in the next 2 years. What do you think that's coming from? That feels surprising to me. I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that managers are stressed and overworked. We also know that managers make or break the employee experience. What are some of those, when you hear that stat, what do you think? What are you doing as organizations? Where do you think these challenges are coming from? Is it sort of these really high expectations? Is it performance results have increased? Do you think? Like, what do you kind of hear when you hear that stat?
I think for us, some of it has had to do with sort of how we cascade business strategy down, right? So if we think about some of the elements of trust and the stat you mentioned, one of them is around competence. So if I don't have confidence in you to that you can lead our team, then of course I'm not going to believe that that you'll lead us to success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think managers being overstretched and underdeveloped, that middle layer, we don't often focus as much attention and time on as we do for some of our more senior managers. And so I think the bar is high, as you mentioned. The bar is high, and their ability to reach it, we're not giving them anything to stand on to reach it, right? Or their step stool is a little bit lower than it might be for some of the more senior folks in the organization. So that's something that we've really been working on. And I know we're all here because we've been working with Mento. We're working on a pilot to support some of our managers with coaching, and so far the results have been promising, but really helping to fill that skills gap so that the step stool is a little bit higher for them to reach that bar.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting about that step stool, and that and acknowledging that there is that there has been some underdevelopment. I think that's really common across organizations. There's a lot of people leaders, and it's nearly impossible, I think, for organizations to provide the same level of support across the board. So I think that's super interesting. What are you all seeing, KJ and Ty? What are your reactions to that?
Yeah, first of all, I love the mention of trust. I almost wanted to jump out of my chair when we were mentioning that. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
because to me, when I think about that, and I think about that stat, credibility, and it really speaks to what we were just kind of talking about on that, is not are you competent, but do I see you in that through your actions and your behaviors or your inactions or the ways that you behave? And so our organization's fully remote. And it's not, I don't believe we have a deficit in this, but I think it's a very watchful area when it comes to managers for this, because it's the element of assumed communication or assumed trust. We're going from Zoom to Zoom, meeting to meeting, Slack to Slack, whatever it is. And we just have to have a level of assumed trust. The problem with that, though, is that if I'm a leader and I have a team and I assume my teams trust me because they show up to the meetings and they tend to put the reports in on time, But if they don't actually trust me through my actions and behaviors, that credibility completely drops. And
Yeah.
then, especially in remote environments, that when you erode that, I mean, it's just like any relationship. Once you erode that trust, it happens so quick, and it takes so long for a manager to try to rebuild that with their people.
Right. Yeah, that is such a great point too, because in remote environments, when you don't see someone, sometimes you don't even know how that trust or that assumed trust, you assume it's there. They showed up to a meeting, but you're not seeing their body language or some of their interactions or how they might be showing up or even how they might be communicating with other colleagues when you're not around. You do get a sense of that when you're in the office because you can see how they're chit-chatting, you can see if they're smiling. There's some reaction time there that also might be missing if you're not seeing people. That's such a great point.
And one of the things for us is that we've had to, really encourage and empower managers to be very intentional with how you cascade information in the business. And so a lot of that falls on the people team, making sure that we make it really easy for managers to be able to share. And then going through training or providing different support so that managers can learn how to read their direct reports and read folks on their teams, because we don't oftentimes know. And sometimes it can feel really elementary for managers, especially folks that are really seasoned. But we found that for us, it's really important that we get back to a lot of these basics so that managers are actually really leaning in on these teams and making sure that they have what they need, and then that we're building that trust. And so, I mean, you're never going to be perfect, but I think the key here is just making sure that you double down on trainings and also on information that folks can cascade so that the organization can really remain in step and people are on the same page.
Yeah, that's great. I think and Jen made a comment that I just want to bring in, and she said I think a lot of it is around the need to upskill emotional intelligence and knowing how to establish relationships. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of head nods there, and I think that a bit about establishing relationships and is another one that we can talk about, sort of the strategies, but that is different in remote settings or hybrid settings, even in today's world where people are just so busy. I'm not sure, how prominent the open calendaring, grab a time with me anytime, culture really exists, or if people even feel like they have time to do that or understand the importance. I'd be curious, how do you all think about, as some of these points of upskilling emotional intelligence and knowing how to establish relationships? And we can move a little bit more into the strategies here of how you all are thinking about people development in 2024 and beyond. I heard a lot about back to basics and making sure that we're actually training people and not just assuming that people know how to manage. But would love to hear a little bit how you all are thinking about developing upskilling emotional intelligence and establishing relationships. And thanks for that question, Jen.
Wanted to jump right in on this because in prior to 2020, when I worked very on-site at companies, I was predominantly a facilitator, would do a lot of on-site facilitation, get third people into a room for 2 days. Wonderful. I had you in the room. I could teach you something, put a book in front of you. I had captured attention there, right? You weren't sitting at your desk.
You had no choice.
But now it's changed, right? So and what I've found related to what you're asking about is the ability to, where I am in a fully remote environment, the ability for us to pull managers together for workshops or to do focused trainings on emotional intelligence or any kind of behavioral skills is very far and few in between. They don't have the time for it. They don't have the bandwidth for it. And it's quick, give me the info. What I have found to be more successful over the past few years is giving them focused attention. And what that really means is, are they able to talk to somebody who's skilled or experienced in this field, who understands this, they can bounce ideas off of? And then it's also about giving them some asynchronous self-guided materials, at least in my world, that they can it's a grab and go. It's like a buffet lunch. But I will add in there. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I will add in there that that's where in my role and what we're doing for managers, using a partner like Minto has helped out, because I'm one person and I have a number of managers that we have at our company. And my ability to give them real-time ability, give them someone who they can talk to real time and focus on, I think has been the catalyst for efficient success and their ability to build better relationships and to understand that it's not just about driving results, it's about learning who the person is and helping a team function better. And we've seen some really good movement from that.
That's fantastic to hear. Wonderful. Well, that's great. And I'd be curious, so we can take a step back here, and then Kelly asked a great question that I want to loop in, but so, what are you all seeing on the ground today? Is manager investment back, and how has your people development strategy evolved over the years? What and how do you think about it now? You just sort of mentioned a little bit how you're thinking about it, KJ. Buffets. We love buffets. We love asynchronous buffets and more targeted support from someone outside the company. And for those that aren't as familiar, with a Mento coach, who coaches at Mento are former operators. That is absolutely something that we provide. And then we do one-on-one coaching, and match people around functional level, experience, etc. So that's sort of that personalized attention that we're talking about. And therefore, it's someone that you can bounce ideas off of and get feedback from. So, why don't we start with you, Ty, and then Shayna, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, so here at Extend, we were tepid about, what does this manager investment look like?
Yeah.
Are we going to actually get into this? Does it actually, work? And we're finding more and more that yes, it works, and yes, we need to invest more. And I think it's been exciting to be able to have a number of different pilot programs here at Extend where we've been able to try out with our managers, whether it is the Minto program, we've done some external coaches, or on-site training as well. That has been resounding from our managers. We want more of this. And so for Extend, back in really early 2023, we were trying to develop manager training internally. So we'd have a business partner that would potentially, put together some of the training. The full HR people team would then put on training for managers. And we found that it just didn't create the same level of trust or credibility with our business because they interact with us on a daily basis. And so being able to bring somebody in externally and then also use a program like Minto has created a lot of trust and I think buy-in from our managers that we're really investing. And it allows just a different perspective that goes a really long way with our organization. So we tried to build internally and just found that, it kind of worked, but really being able to invest in some external resources has gone a long way for our business. And really excited to see so far in 2024 how it's been landing and really helping our managers.
Yeah, and so I guess the build versus buy question is interesting. So is that, do you think that's, a resource question of like, hey, this is where our resources are better fit? It was an efficacy question. And do you think that's going to be more of the same moving forward for your organization as it grows? What do we think about that?
Yeah, and I think for us right now, we're at the size where it is essentially resourcing. We've got a small people team, and so being able to move that externally has been able to free up a lot of resources for my team, which has been great. I think as we grow, it will be a conversation of how do we take some of this material that we've already presented, and do you consider doing some of that internally at that point, or get a larger group of managers together for training. But yeah, it absolutely for us has been a resourcing thing, and getting the buy-in from our leadership team to say we're going to invest in managers this way has been really refreshing and really good for the organization.
Yeah. And do you think that the leadership team was seeing the impact to the business on under investment in managers? What do you think was sort of the turning point?
I think for us, the turning point came after we put some of these programs in place. So I think specifically we just heard resounding feedback from folks that were able to get a coach where, loved the different perspective, loved being able to bounce ideas. It was a safe space. I'm getting a lot out of this. That's what kind of drove our management team to say, like, we should be investing in this. And so it took, probably 4 or 5, maybe 6 months of some of these smaller pilot programs for us to say, wow, these are really starting to work and we're getting some good feedback. And then also, collecting some feedback from some different manager trainings that we were able to do. Folks were really speaking up saying this is the kind of content that we want to see. And for them, it seems like they were finally vocal and provided us some good feedback, which got buy-in from our leadership team.
Yeah, that's great. And Sheena, on the other side of it, I'm curious, because you're obviously a much bigger organization. So I'm curious what is similar and what is different about your experience.
Sure. I think some of the similarity is sort of the shift back and forth of, do we have, based on what KJ said earlier, do we have in-person classes or do we have virtual learning? And so I think post-pandemic, we're just starting to come back to bringing folks in person. A lot of our learning for new managers has been sort of meeting them where they are. So what's this LinkedIn learning pathway that I have access to for an entire year that helps me as a new manager in particular upskill very quickly, but also be able to have like digestible pieces that I can consume or pick what I need based on what's been curated for me by the team.
Yeah.
And then I think we've always been a proponent of mentoring and coaching programs. So the mentoring is still very much in full swing across the organization. And the coaching now we're starting to bring back and think about how do we support managers in their roles. And the last piece that we're doing is around these sort of large scale what we're calling like empowerment fairs. So as we think about shifting our culture and preparing our leaders for the future, we know that there are differences in terms of how senior leaders perceive their ability to carry the business forward and how maybe middle managers do. And so we've cascaded some of this in-person training around business development and our culture and how to engage people. We're in the midst of cascading that down to the final sort of layer of the manager population at Booz Allen, and those are in-person events.
Great. And there was a great question here from Callie, which was, how do we get more companies to find value in partnering with external coaching functions to outsource coaching and mentorship like you all do with Mento? What motivated each of you to say yes?
I can jump back in.
Yeah.
I have another food analogy.
Oh, great. That's what we like to hear. If it's omakase related, I'm in.
If when you go to the mall and they've got the little samples, or you go to Costco, whatever big grocery store, and they have the little samples, and you taste it and you say, "Ooh, that's interesting. I like that. I want a little bit more of that." And it's not so much about getting a free sample, but what really I think was for me, and then also for my organization, was you do have to get in. You do have to experience it yourself. As an HR professional, I understand the value. As HR professional, I understand what it means to develop people, to help our managers, so the core ability to helping a lot of things be successful. But you have to get people into the door to understand what that looks like. And so that's the way that I really found it to be successful, is to pilot it out and be really targeted about getting a small pilot group together throughout the organization. People who I know are, maybe some key stakeholders. They've got really good relationships. They've got the listening ear of somebody who I want to make sure is involved in this. And then, when you give them a good program or you give them something good, it's going to be good for them because they as a human are going to feel better about it. And then it's not you singing the praises, it's the data you can get back, but it's also them being affirmational to what they've experienced.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And then I guess building on that question, and then we'll pop back over, is how were you able to then also get more buy-in? Because we've heard initially at the manager level, it sounds like organizational level, we were able to do that through a pilot. And then as you scaled Mento out to a broader manager population, we often hear, and we just talked about, managers are really busy. They don't feel like they have time. I'm sure we all have had challenges, even if managers, hey, I know I have areas for growth, even if they can acknowledge that, it doesn't mean they're going to take the time to do it. So how do you think you were able to get broad-based buy-in with your manager population, KJ?
Yeah, two things really come to mind. One is the executive recognition of it, which is to say that I've been using this program and expanded it in so many different ways over the past year and a half now, that I've worked really well with our executives there's a welcome message that can come to participants of, from an executive from their department. We're really excited about you being in this program because of expanded scope you've taken on, manager promotion, or you're new to the company in a manager role. And it really gets people feeling really nice and warm about, wow, I feel really connected to this.
Yeah.
And the second element is flexibility. As I mentioned earlier, the workshops aren't working anymore in a remote environment, at least from my perspective. And so taking away it has to be this internal HR person doing it at Thursday at this time, to here's something you have for you, and you get X amount per month, and I want you to work on what that schedule looks like for you. I have really found people, when you give people that ownership, they take it and they run with it. And they've been able to just really find the opportunities for themselves to have that schedule.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think for us, just speaking to your original question, I think when you first asked the question, I was like, is it a question for us personally? Because I think we all believe in coaching here.
Yeah. It's layered. It's
We are,
you,
yeah.
it's your organization, it's non-HR folks,
Yeah,
it's finance
yeah.
folks. I mean, there's a lot of people that play a role in the development of managers. I think that's one of the most, it's so vital to the organization as well. So it's also a lot of people have opinions on it, as I'm sure you'll face, and many aspects of people leadership and HR functions, but especially this, because also most people that have opinions are also managers themselves, so they know what it's like. So it's nuanced, to say the least.
No, for sure, for sure. And I would echo KJ's comments around the data, not only, using pilots, it's just the phase that we're at right now, but then
Yeah.
also using external data. So it used to be 12 and a half years ago when I started at Booz Allen, we spent a lot of time speaking about the ROI of coaching and trying to look for research. That research exists now. And so it's not as difficult to try to point to real data points around how this helps managers. I think the other piece for us is that there is this still lingering stigma of coaching for performance concerns versus coaching for like performance optimization. And so trying to use whatever modes of communication we can and working through HR, business partners and what we call talent integrators to really foot stomp that messaging with leaders is something that's going to continue to be key for us moving forward. To just change like how people are even thinking about utilizing coaching and realizing that there's this modern, fresh way to do it that doesn't involve, a large budget and a large portion of your time. It really is flexible. It's virtual. The coach, there's lots of opportunities and tools to have the coach meet the individual where they are.
Yeah. Love that. Anything else to add there, Ty?
I think, one of the things for us was just highlighting the wins that we hear from our folks that get to go through a program like Minto or any of our other manager training programs, has gone a long way. And so, KJ, you alluded to a little bit is where you find like your strategic partners where like they're going to get a lot of value out of this, but you're also going to get some useful information or be able to cascade across the organization. So we've heard some really fun stories internally of folks that either have loved their coach or they had a really good opportunity to be able to join one of our on-site manager trainings that we've done. And for me, like it's, take those and really try to push those across the organization, make sure that like our C-suite's hearing about it, making sure that folks are hearing the impact of these programs, and it goes a long way. So I've really enjoyed being able to take some of these fun wins here at Extend, whether that be folks that have been able to go to a board meeting and use some of the training or coaching that they've had to get ready for that, or to even just help manage their teams more effectively. I've really enjoyed being able to share that with our leadership teams and continue to use that to push the investment here at Extend.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, this is wonderful. Thank you all so much for being candid and for sharing your experiences. Someone left a question about or a comment about AI, and I think one thing that we can definitely talk about as well. We talked about an async buffet. At one point, we talked about a food mart. I'm sure we can bring in more food analogies as well. I'm curious to hear how your organizations are also thinking about digital learning, asynchronous learning, and also as mentioned in the comment about AI. How are you all thinking about it? It's obviously a very buzzy topic. This commenter said, looking at AI, how AI can help teams, it's showing the ability to free people up, reducing tasks, such as coordination and management, and also democratizing expertise. Is that what you're seeing? Is that the realities you're seeing? And how is that influencing how you all are thinking about talent development now and in the future?
Yeah, I think for us, I think definitely in terms of maximizing your efficiency in your day-to-day work on the
Yeah.
learning team internally, a lot of folks are very excited. But we are also using AI. This is a recent development to help support our managers. So we've also partnered with a vendor where you're basically practicing difficult conversations and different variations of whatever difficult might mean to
Mhm.
you. But speaking with an avatar, behind the avatar is a real actor who's being able to be responsive to what you're saying, and then is able to give you some feedback. So that's our sort of first foray, but I'm very excited to see where else we're able to take it. Um, I was able to attend SciOp, the annual OrgSci conference in Chicago earlier this year, and there were some really cool tools that are being developed out there with AI and coaching. And I think they're not there quite yet. I think if you sign up for any of the free demos, the conversations are stilted or still a little awkward, but they're better than you might think in terms of showing empathy. So I think we are much closer than we think.
KJ, Ty, anything from you all?
Yeah, I'll add in, we from a learning lens, we haven't integrated an approach to really using AI. I probably will tell you from my role, I do expand within that to kind of really get good ideas or to make sure I'm not crazy sometimes thinking through something.
You're not, I
Which I don't know
promise.
if I should trust AI for that.
Yeah.
But we are using it to not so much with menial tasks and clerical administration, but we are finding ways to try to help it. I believe it was a performance optimization. I love that term earlier
Mhm.
of really making sure people can be more efficient within their roles. It's still very early days, which I think that technology really is. But I will agree to the point. If you think about that now versus 10, 15, 20 years ago, it has made so much leaps and bounds in being able to be a value add learning and development tool.
And we're not currently using any AI right now in our talent development space, but obviously, super excited to see what other folks are using. But one thing that we, are doing here at Extend is trying to make sure that we provide resources for folks to do asynchronous learning,
Mhm.
which might just so happen that there are AI courses out there on the different platforms that we have. But one thing for us is just being able to provide tools and support for folks so that if they do want to go and explore, how can I use, AI within my organization, that they have them. So that's investing in some conferences for folks. That's, like I said, asynchronous learning platforms that people can find. And then we've also had some leaders as well that have done group learning sessions. So they'll find a course that, they think is relevant to projects or initiatives that they're working on, and they'll have their whole organization go through it. And so we've seen a lot of success on that front, just encouraging folks to talk about it, look internally on how they could potentially be using it. And my team is just here to support and provide resources as they need them.
Yeah, that's great. So I think one of the key things that I'm hearing out of this is almost like we're taking a high-low balance, almost like high touch with something like one-on-one coaching, and then also low touch, just from the user's experience in terms of sort of async digital learning and other sort of optimization, more targeted optimizations, like Shana, how you were describing. Feedback on performance management, things like that. Does that describe kind of the modern manager development stack? Am I missing anything? I'm a great summarizer. Okay,
Sounds
perfect.
right. I wish it was
Great,
more
love it.
expensive, but it sounds right.
I know. Yeah, the analogy wasn't great, but I couldn't come up with a great food analogy at the time. And also one person did mention, or actually we have a great comment on this, is that a question, apologies. Did you folks see that when leadership sets a goal for learning and expectations for managers to grow, that these approaches result in managers setting their priorities to learn and grow? Have we seen any of that sort of connection or an attempt at sort of establishing anything at the OKR level within the company or within specific functions?
I think for us, at least in our organization, we're a little bit smaller, but we have to be a little more intentional than that, than just, setting goals or saying things. That we really do have to lean into our manager populations on providing training, providing programs. So it's easy enough to, set a goal and try to encourage folks, but there's a little more action to it than just having a vision.
Yeah.
And that's where we are right now, is really trying to make sure that we're leaning in on what programs and resources and how we can potentially expand those for employees. So certainly, it's the right start, or you have to start somewhere, but my team has been very involved in making sure that we are directly confronting, or confronting is probably too strong a word, but getting in front of our managers and making sure that we're providing resources and trainings for them, so that it's more of a push than a just telling folks or trying to encourage folks.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's been about there is some excitement for some of the in-person things that we're doing. So I think the word of mouth has sort of spread like wildfire that, hey, if you go to this event and you do feel special, you do, you get you get this free bag of goodies, and you learn about the business. Like, hey, it's a win-win. So I think there is a lot of energy and hunger for in-person connection and in-person networking, in-person learning. And so that luckily for us does align with the direction that the executives have set around priorities for learning for managers. But I don't know that we see that enthusiasm for every single offering we have, but definitely has been nice to see it for the in-person programming we're doing.
And I'll just add in, I would love to see more progress. Not only where I'm at, but just like throughout, I think on this. I think there's a difference between, leadership can tell managers, here's what we expect of you. But if we're also not going to hold you accountable for growing yourself, growing your team, which again, it's much harder to do than a business metric to achieve. And I think that's a lot of times our organizations don't more readily do that. But I do find you then you got your group of managers who are always going to be energetic and excited about learning new skills and leading their teams. And then you have the managers who you say, hey, this is what we need you to do. We need you to sign up for this and do this. Yeah, cool. Because I'm not going to be held accountable for it. And I think that from my perspective is a gap that has to close, unfortunately, because the thing we're risking is that you're getting all these teams, all these individual contributors who are maybe being impacted by poor or subpar management, who just are going to do what's going to be held accountable to them.
That's interesting. And what do you think some ways that, as we look to the future, like, are we going to be do you think people are going to be measured more based on their performance as a manager in terms of their abilities? Will we think about promotions differently? Were you seeing any trends in terms of shifts in that recognition, or do you feel like it's a little bit more business as usual and we haven't quite, like, high performant, which was mentioned earlier, high performant ICs oftentimes do get promoted?
I'll pick it up and then let my awesome panelists see what they think on it. I think from what I've seen, a reality is that I think there is still much of a business as usual frameworks in terms of, yes, high performing ICs get promoted, and then on the back end HR, we're trying to mitigate ways to make sure that you're getting into management for the right reasons and fun things like that. But what I'm hoping is that, and I think we're starting to see some beginnings of it with getting people access to things like coaches or mentors, is more of a human-centered approach to leadership. Because we've all known this to be true. But again, I think it goes back to, are the executives, our leadership, or any companies measuring that in the way that is impactful? And I think that we can slowly get there.
Yeah, that measurement piece is really interesting.
And I think, for us here at Extend, we run a very, very lean team. So managers are asked to do a lot, as we kind of talked about today. And so for us, it continues to be business as usual, but our managers are measured and recognized based on the results that they're bringing to the business. And in a lot of cases for the managers, it's wearing multiple hats with very lean teams to get a lot of stuff done to get towards our end goal here at Extend. And so being able to provide programs, whether that be manager training or coaching through Mento, I think is a way for us to recognize managers and say, like, we know you all are doing a lot and we're trying to get you some resources outside of just extra headcount to be able to support you during this growth period for us. And so that's been really big is just trying to make sure that folks recognize that, like, we know you're doing a lot, and so we're trying to find ways to be able to support you, to help you grow as a manager and grow your teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. And we have a few great questions coming in, and I want to make sure that they are answered in the 10 minutes we have left. So a few that are good. I'm just looking through here. Thank you all, participants, for all of your great questions. This is fantastic. So two questions. One, have you seen any real practical examples of how coaching has led to retention?
I got a quick answer for this because maybe also I'm the one who's
Done.
been using this for a year and a half. Yes. And that has been the coolest thing. Like I'll get the leaders talking to me and I won't share what they've said, but I share it with my leadership and it is absolutely affirmational. And I know it is a direct part of their retention. Being a high performing leader, leading wonderfully, and it's connected to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we use coaching, like, when we get folks involved with coaching, we let them know, like, our goal is to continue to retain you and keep you motivated here at Extend. And so we're very open with our employees about that. But I've had several employees come to me talking about how it's been one of the best experiences for them, how much they've learned. And then also sharing the actual outcomes that they've had from coaching, which has been really great to see. Including some of those where, we had an on-site in-person manager summit for our leadership here at Extend, and hearing from folks in person, because a lot of times they won't come to me on Zoom or Slack, they're very quiet.
Yeah.
But seeing them in person, I got a lot of those examples of, they're like, this has just been so great for me. And so we have a lot of really good real life examples. And I think one for us that's very specific is that I've seen someone who is stepping into more and more of a leadership role, and they've been able to use their coach to bounce ideas off for different initiatives that we have here at Extend. And for them, it's been invaluable to have that resource, and they've shared that directly with me. So it's been really great to see.
That's wonderful. And I actually think this ties into the next question, which is, what is behind the motivation for managers to incorporate the added tasks to their job? Coupled with stress, most managers are realizing the pay is not enough, which I think creates the ideas of getting what they can from a company and leaving after 2 or 3 years. I'll just share one anecdote that we've heard recently, which is that, and even actually, Shayna, we were talking about this yesterday, which is that growth can come in many forms. It's not just a promotion up. At startups, right, there might not be the same, like, here's a new title and expanded scope necessarily, depending on where they are in the organization. And I think one of the things that we've heard is that that's a great place where coaching can be extremely helpful, which is that it can motivate you to find and develop meaningful growth goals for yourself, and realize as well that it's not just about necessarily a promotion or pay. There's a lot that you can get from working within a role or company that can equal growth. I'd be curious, does that resonate with what you all are seeing and experiencing? And then how do you keep managers motivated? Is this a tool for motivation? I guess that's sort of the other side of the coin of retention. But how do you think about keeping managers motivated in 2024 dual IC manager roles and retaining them beyond a few years, especially the most important high performers?
I think rewards are key, Jamie. And so I do see coaching as a reward. And so even though we've not gone large scale rather, I think there is a piece of this that at the most basic level says, hey, my company's investing in me by offering me this particular service and giving me access that's previously only been offered to folks at the executive level. And then I think too, in conversations with your coach, they can help you to uncover what are the parts of your job that you really do enjoy, that you can hold on to in times of high stress and
Yeah.
maybe. So I think there's that reflective space that coaching really does offer. But yeah, I think for us, it's been about how do we constantly acknowledge these folks and what they're doing. And then I think too, there's a longer term piece of strategy where we're strategizing around Okay, well, if managers are focused primarily on the business, is there a way to augment their role so that they don't have to do the people management? Like, are there people either externally or internally that we can direct most of that career coaching responsibility, that career development responsibility to, so that managers feel as though they can focus on managing people to drive business results, but don't necessarily have to do some of the extra work.
That's
So
super,
that's something that we've been in conversation about as well.
super interesting. Okay, Jay or Ty, anything to add? If not, that can also be a phenomenal segue to sort of our final question here as we wrap up, which is, you know, what is the future? What do we think the rest of the year is going to hold? And then what are some thoughts on 2025? Shana, that's obviously super interesting to think about. What is the role of modern management? Does it include all, you know, basically like 15 things of driving business and driving people and supporting them? Can part of that be outsourced? Curious to hear if you have anything else to add, and then also your thoughts, KJ and Ty.
Yeah, I think I covered it, but I do think I firmly believe, and I think all of us here are coaching evangelists on this call. Like, I firmly
Yeah.
do believe that coaching has to be a part of our future. Like, I think it's an invaluable tool to really help managers in lots of different ways, and to help provide lift for a population that for so long has faced this sort of underinvestment. So I circle back to our AI coaching conversation. I'm very excited to see where that heads and where it goes and how it increases accessibility. But for now, I'm just so thrilled with how platforms like Mento have really democratized access to coaching and enabled organizations to really push that opportunity lower down in the organization than we have traditionally.
Beautiful.
I'll just add in. First of all, that was wonderful. I feel like that was so much what you said could be like a bumper sticker if I put on the back of my car for that.
I love that.
Like a little beep beep for coaching.
Yeah.
But I think very similar in that. I believe that you know, of all the tools that you can give a manager, frameworks, access, resources, I do believe that if we were running out the door, if I had to get one thing, it is coaching. And it's coaching and mentorship. And I've found that to be the most invaluable thing that you can give a new manager, a seasoned manager who maybe is switching industries, a manager who's through an org change is taking on a team that they didn't sign up to take on. All these things that happen. If you can give someone who they can talk to, who's seasoned and experienced, that to me has been the absolute mainstay. And I see that continuing to be the main light going throughout this year. And my hope leading into 2025 is continued expansion of that. I think you have to help managers first. And then if you can get beyond that, the expansive opportunities to give opportunities like this to other people, I think could go a long way. And that's what I'm hoping to see going into the next year.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think
Promise
for
I'll
us,
make you the bumper sticker.
yeah, beep beep for coaching. I like it. I think for us, it's, you know, trying to figure out from here how it scales. We've got a lot of excitement in our organization to be paired with a coach or to be able to join the different trainings that we have. And so the focus going into 2025 will be figuring out how we can do that in an economical way so that more and more people can get through these programs and really start empowering our folks. So that'll be the big question for us, but obviously something the organization's really excited about investing in and trying to solve. And good to see that we've got so many folks here at Extend who want to be able to join these programs and get involved. For me, is really encouraging.
Beautiful. Well, thank you all so much. We are just at time. And thank you everyone for your comments and for your comments, the phenomenal questions. Thank you all so much. You made me look great as the host of this conversation. So I appreciate you all. And thank you, Ty, Shana, and KJ so much for sharing your thoughts and giving your time to all of us here and having the opportunity to learn from you all and what you're doing at your organization. So thank you everyone so much, and have beautiful rest of days.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.